to our institute today. Mr. Bhalla's name, Mr. Bhalla's name resonates with eminence in the world of economics and policy. As an internationally renowned economist, prolific author, and trusted advisor to governments and organizations worldwide, he has served as the Executive Director for India at the International Monetary Fund and has worked at the World Bank for multiple spans as Chief Investment Officer and Senior Economist.
Furthermore, he served as the vice president of Goldman Sachs before being appointed as the director of Deutsche Bank. His accomplishments are nothing short of extraordinary. His work transcends boundaries, ideologies, challenging conventions, and offering innovative solutions to the most pressing global challenges.
We are privileged to learn from his wisdom and expertise, which has guided nations and inspired generations of scholars and leaders. His insights have charted new territories, unveiling the intricate dynamics of the economic systems, and his research has forged a path toward prosperity for nations far and wide. Dr. Bhalla's journey through the realm of economic theory, policy, and analysis stands as a testament to his intellectual prowess and unwavering dedication.
Dr. Bhalla's extensive body of work covers a wide range of economic subjects, from international trade to development economics, from monetary policy to poverty alleviation. His ability to explain complex economic concepts in simple and accessible language has made his insights invaluable to policymakers, academics, and practitioners around the globe. We are truly privileged to have Mr. Bhalla with us today.
On behalf of IIT Delhi, we would like to extend a small token of gratitude for which we would like to invite Dr. Surjit Bhalla and Professor Devashish Mandal, the president of our economics club, onto the stage.
Without further ado, I present the stage to Dr. Surjit Bhalla.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction. And it's a real privilege and honor to talk to young students. Um, I myself was an engineer, was being the operative word. But I want to go through some of the some of the, if you will, trials and tribulations of being an engineer and then graduating from it, and in the hope that you would, if you find the experience interesting and perhaps guide you in your future efforts, because I want to explain a few aspects of my engineering education. Um, First, it was in the US at Purdue University. And this was from 1965 to 1969. And it was quite a, um, if you will, innovative time in engineering, as I'll explain in a minute. But after the first year, I wanted to drop out of engineering. And my brother, who had also graduated from Purdue, said, no, 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 you have to stay on, get an engineering degree, and after that, do whatever you wish to do. So the reason I didn't want to do engineering after being very enthusiastic about it is that one of the courses was technical drawing. And they had, regardless of what field you were in, and technical drawing, I presume you still have it, maybe not. Even if you're not a civil engineer, everybody had to take that course. And it was to project, as you know, three-dimensional figures in two dimensions. And no matter how much I studied, there was just no way I could get beyond the C. And the only reason I got C was there were some number questions or whatever it was. But that was the my first foray, and I stayed on. And you know, engineering, you should all be, apart from the fact you should be proud you're at IIT, it is in my view, a fantastic education because it teaches you how to think. It teaches you to think logically. I ended up in first political science, and after one course of political science, I said this was not for me. And in economics, but believe me, there isn't. Logic is not, if you will, honored or respected as much as it is in engineering, which it has to be because that's a matter of, in many cases, life and death. So if you're not logical, it doesn't go very far. Now, part of the, after having found out that I couldn't really convert three dimensions into two dimensions, if you recall, or in the history books, you won't recall, but in the history books, this was an era of coding. Fortran had just been invented maybe 5 years earlier, and the computer, 1620, yeah. Oh, sorry, thank you. And the 1620 is that, can you hear me now?
Yes,
I
sir.
should hear closer to it. And the 1620 was in a room by about 20 by 40 feet, and that was the entire, and I think it had 16 kilobytes of memory. That's it. Um, so anyway, I got very interested in coding, and it is about as logical as you can get. So you can see where I was going. And indeed, my very first job, I did work a year and a half as an engineer, and this was at a place called Fairchild Semiconductor. And some of you will find out, if you are in computer science, that Fairchild Semiconductor gave birth to several semiconductor companies. One of them is called Intel. As it happens, advanced micro devices also emerged from Fairchild Semiconductor. And if you will, I've changed jobs many times and changed careers in 2 or 3 times. And I have no regrets. Maybe sometimes I feel a little regret for the following. That was 6 months into my job at Fairchild. This would be January to June of 1969. My boss came to me and said, you know, there are some people here, they want to start a boutique semiconductor firm. And, you know, and I was lucky in that there were not that many coders at that time, and they would like you to join. So I said, let me think about it. And the next day, I said, look, the reason I said, let me think about it, really, I'm applying to graduate school in public and international affairs because I want to change out of engineering. And I was going to ask you for a recommendation, so I hope you'll still give me a recommendation. But I'm afraid I really can't leave. Or I have to, I'm applying for graduate school. Just by the way, that firm was Intel. So there is a lot of future in coding. Then my path took place, and forever I was interested in public policy. And the reason I'm going through this, if you will, background, that I don't think anything else could have prepared me as well for my career or my interests, or as well as for pursuing my interests as a degree in engineering. So even in public policy, it has stood me, and my path to public policy was first, as I said, through uh, public and international affairs, because I was always very interested in policy, and then as an economics graduate. Then, and this is where again the same background comes into play. I got very interested in financial markets after having never seen or read the Wall Street Journal ever. And then in 1980, I read this book called Noble House. And Noble House is a great, great novel, and it's about by James Clavell. And in there, it is these Chinese in Hong Kong who are completely obsessed with trading. And it's a fascinating book. And if you want to hear how is it that I, as a engineer, then as a economist at the World Bank, got interested in financial markets, it was precisely through that. I now want to come to two aspects, and this is now fast forwarding into the real substance of my talk, is that, and just by background, I've always been interested in writing, and if you will, people have accused me, and I think fairly, of being a contrarian. And I want to, if you will, explain. It's a fair accusation. And the explanation for that is very, very simple. That when you're doing research, and I've loved research, whether it's in financial markets or policies or cricket for that matter, that there's no point, you do research and you reach a conclusion which many others have reached, or several others have reached, then I lose interest, and I don't publish that. So that's the reason for being a contrarian. And I just want to illustrate that the first ever article that I wrote, a newspaper article, was in 1980. And at that time, there was this movie that was about to be released. That's what, 43 years ago, by Richard Attenborough, called Gandhi. I don't know how many of you have seen it. It's a great film. But what was the controversy at that time? The controversy at that time, and this tells you a little bit about your, why we are called argumentative Indians. We'll make an argument out of anything. Some of it not so. I don't mean it in a very positive fashion. But I wrote this article called In Defense of Attenborough. And the reason in defense was, the argument was, even before the movie was released, while it was being made, that how come an Englishman should make a film about Gandhi? Now, I never quite understood the logic. I hope you agree with me, there's not much logic to that thought. But basically, that was, so in that sense, even, because of my interest in films, even that little bit rubbed people the wrong way. And then I decided well, this is a lot of fun to be a contrarian, but that was an accidental contrarianism. Now, one of the important um, aspects of doing research, and if you will, being a contrarian, is that you have to be very careful with the data. And this is where I think we have gone significantly astray. Data is, on one hand, it comes out that data is the new oil, and it is. It is extremely, you guys, and guys I mean in a broad generic sense, not boys. You guys are on the threshold of a massive data explosion in the world because of this little instrument that everybody has, and there's instant communication. And the other no, this is not a disturbing aspect, this is a positive aspect. The disturbing aspect about this new age is that social media has become very important in our lives, in everybody's lives. And it gives everybody an opportunity to be the Pope, to be the wise person, and unfortunately, there are lots of people who misuse that opportunity. And I will try and illustrate how in my profession, that is economics, how data is being misused. And it is, there's a book that I would recommend by Robert Schiller, who's a Nobel Prize winner, and it's on narratives. That nowadays, everything is driven by narrative. So it doesn't, because I think of instant communication, that people think that it's, and especially on some of the economic subjects that I'll talk about, that because of instant communication, you put that out and your bluff needn't be called, and if it's called, it gets lost in the noise. So everybody feels, everybody meaning many people, and these are, if it was the Aam Aadmi, for lack of a better phrase, who thought that he or she, Aam Aurat or Aam Aadmi, would say something that is okay, that's absolutely fine. But when experts do it in order to sell a story, in order to sell a narrative, which more often than not is political and ideological. Now, this never used to be the case. I've had, discussions and arguments, and not arguments, discussions on different opinions. And it was all argued through the pages of journals, whether it be with Amartya Sen, who I engaged in 3 or 4 times in the 80s, or whatever. It was very, apart from being very civilized, it was on academic grounds, and you could disagree, and we did disagree. But today, it is not necessarily on academic grounds. There is an agenda, there is a narrative that you want to sell. And I'll give you 2 or 3 examples, and some of those you might have seen already or might have read about. The first example, and I think this is quite a telling example. You have, I think, as is well understood or should be well understood, that India is going through a fantastic transformation. They only, you know, it's not recognized enough that for the last 30 years, we have grown at an average annual GDP rate of 5% per annum. 30 years. So this transcends all political parties. It started in 1991. So that's 32 years. And, it gets overshadowed by the knowledge, and the correct knowledge, that look, there's a country called China. And China grew at about 2 percentage points faster than ours for 30 years. But we don't recognize that we've done. We as a nation, we as a people, have done extraordinarily well. To grow at 5% an annum or 5 plus for 30 years is something quite unique in history, apart from the fact that the real larger uniqueness is that of China. The reason I bring that up is that that's the background. Okay? And I think we'll, and maybe if any of you are interested in the question and answers, I will go into as to why we are on the threshold of a fantastic growth, and growth where India will exceed the growth of China for the next 20, 30 years. On that, let me tell you, this is and it's something I've, first wrote about this in 2006-7, and compared India and China. It's a fantastic story. It's a fantastic history. Between 1500 and 1980, that's 480 years, right? India and China had broadly the same per capita income, give or take, right? Plus minus 10%, it doesn't matter. But they were really in the same ballpark for 480 years. And the two largest economies, and there was a time when we were the two richest economies. This was much before colonialism, etc. Then China started, this is a lesson for any of you interested in economics and growth. China started its growth process in 1978. We started our growth process in 1991. And this 13-year lag is actually quite telling and explains in large part the differences in the growth pattern of the two economies. But coming to the present, 2010 to 2019 is the first decade that per capita growth in India exceeded that of China. And in a paper, it's a blog for Brookings called Reversal of Fortunes, we point out that, look, it's very likely that India and China will have the same per capita income in about 20 years from now. Now if that happens, and we give great reasons for it to happening, mind you, we're not, so if China, the response of people, or some commentators was, world growth is going to decline for various reasons, etc. So therefore, India will not grow that fast as you expect. And I'll come to that in a second. And this calculation has nothing to do with the absolute growth. So if China grows at -6, we grow at -3. degrow, if you will, and we'll still reach convergence. So all that is needed is about a 3 percentage point gap in per capita income growth for the next 20 years. And as I said, you look at the last 30 years, China has grown about 2 percentage points faster than India. So it's not incongruous, it's very, very realistic. I think it's very realistic, but happy to. Now, one other, so coming back to data as the new oil and ideology, some of you might have seen that for the last, and all of these things, and there's reason for it, and perhaps we can go into that the questioning of data and coming out with easily falsifiable conclusions is really political, and it's coterminous with Prime Minister Modi being elected in 2014. It's also coterminous with social media and the explosive use of data for policy and discussion. So going back to two statistics I want to give you. One, and on this, is that CMIE, which is a major firm on data, and prior to 2014, they also started doing this in 2014. Prior to 2014, if you go into the stock market and do research, CMIE was and is a major pioneering firm in data dispensation on stock markets, on firms, on their profits, etc. So I've used it enough, and anybody who's in the stock market has used that data. Nevertheless, in 2014, they decided to make a foray into what was the nature of employment and unemployment in India. And one of their big conclusions was that female labor force participation, which just means that what percentage of women who are in the age group of working, which is taken as 15 to 64. So if you're in that age group, only 8% of women have chosen to work in India, or chosen or not chosen, only 8%. To just give you an idea of this statistic, which has white currency, and so just give you an idea, there is no other country in the world at no time in history that has recorded this 8% figure. Not Yemen, not Kuwait, not any war-torn country, not even Afghanistan. And here you have somebody claiming that, listen, the Indian economy is in such bad shape, and that women, only 8% of them choose to work. And if you can explain why that is even gone beyond first base, to use a baseball metaphor, no cricket metaphor applies to this inverted rocket science to come up and to gain white currency such that politicians quoted, etc. Second, and you might have seen or heard about this book written by a friend of mine, Asuka Modi, and somebody I've known for a long time, in which he claims that over the next decade, India will need 200 million jobs in order to take care of the ongoing existing employment problem. Okay? A simple statistic. India will need 200 million jobs over the next decade. And he's quite precise. Over the next decade, 200 million jobs in the economy are needed. Now, it so happens, and this is by the UN Population Council, to project population is not very difficult, especially of the working age, because these people have already been born. So, because you're taking 15 to 64 as the age group. And it so happens that when you calculate the number of people that will actually be there in the age group of 15 to 64, 100 million. You will add 100 million people in the 15 to 64 age group. And here's a leading economist claiming that India will need 200 million people during the same time. So I'm just, this is what, unfortunately, I, as an economist, have to fight with. What do you do? And this is published in, various, not really journals, but clearly this one, the latest piece you'll see in Project Syndicate, etc. So I think, it's sad that this has to be the case, that this has got currency, and that this is, if you will, part of and parcel of the narrative that is being sold. I don't know whether, to the extent that I've tried to see if this kind of misinformation exists anywhere else in the world. And the answer is, I haven't found any parallel to this kind of misinformation by respected individuals. You just don't find it anywhere else. So this is, as you go forth, this is something that you might encounter, and certainly you will encounter, because this will only get worse and not better. So one other aspect about data that I want to talk about, and that is that, there's Charles Dickens, these were the best of times, these were the worst of times. And for you guys, it clearly, there is a strong aspect, it's the best of times. I want to give you what's happening in the world and in India over the last 10 years, and what I think will make matters worse for any